So welcome everyone to Making Writing Genuine with Cheryl Emmerich and Tracy Sims, who will be facilitating the session tonight. It's always great to see people from all over Ontario joining the OTF Connect sessions and being with us for some great professional development in the evening. So I'm just going to turn it over to Tracy and Cheryl. Thank you very much.
Okay, welcome. We're really excited to talk a little bit about writing tonight. And for those of you who know us, welcome, and nice to see a lot of familiar names in the chat box. For those that don't, Cheryl and I work in the Waterloo Region District School Board, and we've been a teaching team for 5 years together. We run a blog called Passionately Curious, and we will share that link with you later on as well. And throughout our session today, if you want to share any ahas or any of your thoughts or connections or of your own experiences, feel free to chime in the chat, but you can also connect with us via social media and use the hashtag OTFConnects or the hashtag that's on the screen there, Connecting Learners. So welcome, we're excited. And to get started, we truly believe that educators' best resource is each other, and we love social media. So we are on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and we have a blog, which we will share in the comments. But before we get started, if you have a Twitter name or a Twitter account, an Instagram account, or a blog, please take a minute to share that. You can either write it right on the whiteboard slide, or you can share it in the chat. Great. Just so that you're aware, the chat's being recorded as well, so if you want to go back and reflect on something that was shared, we are going to share quite a bit of examples and things today. If you want to go back, OTF will send out the link afterwards. You can also look at the chat, connect with some of these incredible educators on Twitter, Instagram, or through their blogs as well, but just so you don't feel overwhelmed right now having to add all those new contacts. So thanks for sharing that. We want to get started just getting a feeling. Before we even answer this question, can you show a green check mark if you are currently teaching in a kindergarten classroom and a red X if you are in a different role? Maybe you're in a grade 1 or 2 classroom, maybe you're a planning time teacher or some type of consultant. And if you could share in the chat if you're in a different role, just so we kind of get a little bit of a feel of the room as to where people are from. Great, so Brenda's in a 2-3. Wow, some occasional teachers, that's great. Seven, 8, fantastic. Great, so it looks like we have about, from the people who've responded, we have about at least 30 kindergarten teachers and 10 or 15 are in a different role. There should be a little check mark underneath your name for the person who couldn't find it. And when you click on it, it'll give you the option of doing a yes or a no. So it looks like quite a bit of kindergarten, but there's a good spread. So a lot of our examples today are going to be based out of kindergarten, but so many of them can be altered and changed in order to make an impact in any grade level. So if you want a little bit more information about that, or if we're saying something and you want a little bit further, just let us know as we go too. So when and where does writing happen in your classroom, either today, or when and where are you seeing it happen in a space that you're supporting? You can add your answer again in the chat or right on the whiteboard. So lots of great examples. I see a lot of people talking about how it's embedded in play, with labels, lists, and signs. Lots of different examples of different types of writing that can happen. Sounds like a lot of genuine examples, too, of things that are happening. Math journals. I like that we're seeing a lot of different areas of the classroom, especially in a kindergarten or a primary room where writing is engaged with. Great. So Cheryl's going to share a little bit about the classroom environment in our classroom and how literacy is connected to that.
And as Tracy mentioned earlier, how just reading some of your posts that you just put up, how you're embedding writing into all areas of the classroom. You'll sort of see bits and pieces of our classroom right now and how we also incorporate that in. We debated on even if we'd need a centralized writing table. That was a big debate we were going through before the summer ended when we were doing our classroom setup. And we do have a table close by just because it is a natural place where kids need that hard surface when writing, although that's not the only place that writing happens, as of course you know. So we do have a centralized area where a majority of writing materials are available. Here you can see there's some Post-its, some different mediums of writing tools, blank pieces of paper. Our kids love little booklets, and as we were reading some literature, they're really curious about the speech bubbles. And so you can see a piece that was written above, and then below it is just another form of paper with a speech bubble attached. This is just another few tools that we have readily available in the classroom throughout the year. So some whiteboards, some markers, letter sound charts, their name tags, and some clipboards that they can take throughout the classroom. And in our building area, we have a little basket with clipboards too. Often we see some people wanting the children to draw or write before they even create. We were finding that when we were trying that, it almost stifled the building process and creation. So how we embed writing is just getting into play with them, exposing them to the materials, grabbing it while we're in the play, and then also just having natural conversations as to why do people use blueprints. If you're creating a restaurant, making notes of maybe the schedule that's going to be posted, creating signs to welcome people in. So by getting into play with the kids, we incorporate it in a genuine way so that they are building some context of how we can incorporate the writing.
And although we have the centralized writing materials in our writing area, we found that just simply adding a little basket with mini clipboards significantly increased the amount of writing that we were seeing in our building space. So we added writing materials to building, and then we saw them, they didn't have to walk across the room to get some paper and to write. They had it right there, and they were much more apt to pick it up and use it.
As you know, in a kindergarten classroom, this is probably something that comes up quite frequently in dramatic play. So recipes, taking orders, writing receipts, and this year we incorporated some phone books and also just little pads of paper that they could write their phone numbers in. Great way to also incorporate numeracy and just talking about the formation of numerals when writing them down.
So that's a little bit about where some of the things are located in our classroom. And it's going to look different in every classroom regardless, or depending on the structure of your room and the grade level, and even your students each year are going to support you in understanding what you're going to put out and where it's going to go. So we wanted to share with you a short video clip. If you aren't familiar with this site, it's actually quite a fantastic resource. It's called etfopley.ca, and Mally's going to share the link with you in the chat box, and then we're going to give you a few minutes. It's only like a minute and a half to watch it. This is Surgeon Sam, and they give a little tour of the writing space in their classroom. On that website, there's lots of different videos of different learning spaces. There's some videos on early mathematics. There's some videos by Dr. a different doctor speaking about some different developmental pieces in the early years. So it's a really great website for you to check out other videos as well. So we're going to have, Mally's going to share that link, and then we're going to just turn off our mic. When you finish watching the link, just come back and give us a green check mark.
And actually, we can watch it together. So I'm just also do a web tour of this, so that we can all watch it together. Yeah, but the same thing. If you can go to the link, or we can watch it together. And if you can give us a green check mark when you're finished.
Okay, so it looks like we're getting some green check marks back. Just give a couple more minutes. Looks like we're about halfway. All right, so we want to put it back to you, and the question is, do you have a centralized area for writing? A check mark for yes, and an X for no. And if you're putting the X, we would like you to extend it in sharing what's been successful about it, not being centralized. If you're brave enough, you can also use the microphone. Okay, so it looks like the majority of the people do have a centralized area. We're seeing a few people that don't. It's nice to see that a lot of people are allowing that freedom to take their writing into different areas of the classroom. And to add to that question, are there any specific materials that support your writing?
I like the one that I'm seeing here that talks about non-permanent vertical learning surfaces. It's really interesting when you change the plane for writing too, how it changes the excitement, how it changes the way that they have to use their muscles to write. Laptops, great. iPads, technology is becoming such a big part of writing too. Different shapes of paper. Great. So many great ideas. Someone was asking maybe for an example of a vertical surface to write on. I'm not sure if that person wants to respond to that. Sometimes even just writing on the board, or even taping a paper to the wall. That can provide that space for them to write on a different surface, not always flat on a table. Great. Okay, we're going to keep moving on, but it sounds like we have a room full of really experienced educators, and I'm looking forward to even going back and reading some of the ones that passed by too quickly. So we debated whether or not to include this piece, which is obviously going to be really relevant to K1 and 2 educators, but still a foundational piece as we move beyond those grades as well. Cheryl and I have found that we're in a school where the children struggle with letters and sounds. It's something that many of them don't come to school knowing, and we did a lot of research on it over the last couple of years because we were trying to figure out how could we be more effective as educators in supporting this. And of course, if they don't have a strong letter and sound base, writing becomes a little bit more challenging in terms of moving beyond just scribbles and random letters and lines and curves. We were trying to figure out how do we scaffold to that next space. So we found this really great book, and Mally shared the link in the chat too. It's called No More Teaching a Letter a Week, and it's all based on research and studies that have been done to support the learning of the alphabet in the early years.
And I know sometimes when we, especially at the beginning of the year, we have this sense of feeling that we need to cover everything. Sometimes we feel the pressures from boards and admin to know the letters and read at certain levels. But the big idea is coverage doesn't always mean that learning is happening or that the children are retaining what they are being exposed to. So the important thing is to track and to document and to plan based on where their needs are and exposure in a variety of different contexts.
So there's been a lot of talk on social media about just not doing that letter of the week or letter of the day, and a lot of the research in this text, if you have colleagues that you're trying to push a little further, or you yourself are trying to understand why or why not that might be the best way to teach the alphabet, this book is really good because it grounds all of that thinking and research. So they go further to talk about why knowing the alphabet is important. Knowing not just the letter names, but the sounds and the meaning that letters carry is essential to children's early literacy learning. So the research says, and this is, I mean, some of it seems common sense when we read it, and then other parts I thought were really interesting. They said, if you know more letter names, you generally know more sounds. If you know less names, you generally know less sounds. So they often use their knowledge of letter names to learn the letter sounds, especially when that phoneme's associated with it. And then most children learn the name before the sound. So what we thought was really interesting, we started researching and looking at the way our children were learning the alphabet and learning how to write and engage with print. And we noticed that a lot of them knew the names of letters, but they weren't quite sure the sound that they made. And so we wondered to ourselves, why do we even teach the letter name? Why don't we just teach the letter sound? And so we came across a lot of research by Montessori, and in Montessori programming, they teach the sounds of the letters and they don't teach the names. So there's not concrete research other than what's been done by Montessori, which of course is done by them and going to be skewed by what they program and teach. But really interesting that they found that their children progress a lot better when they know those sounds, because when they're transitioning from learning those sounds to writing, the sound is what helps them to compose words. So I think that's a really interesting piece too. Someone had asked where we got the letter sound charts on the last slide. They were given to us by a consultant, and we just laminated them. I'm not exactly sure where they came from, but there's lots of different ones that you can find online that you could print and laminate too. They're just clean and easy to see, and that's why we liked those ones. And I like Nancy's comment there too about when she taught in Scotland, they sang the sounds, not the letter names. A lot of parents will say to us, oh, my kids know their ABCs and they can sing the ABCs, but they don't know which letters are which when you show them a chart, and they aren't able to use that knowledge of the letter names to compose and to write. So interesting research that we came across.
A lot of the other questions that were coming to mind is, you know, should we be teaching more upper or lower? Should we start with names or sounds, some of the easier letters or versus complicated? And in the text it said research tells us that there's no perfect sequence of the instruction for alphabet knowledge. So that was kind of reassuring to hear, and then also think about when we were planning as well.
Another piece that they talked about, along with what Cheryl was saying, they did a study and they said, although there's no perfect order, people have checked and tried to research and figure out what's the best way to teach this. Here's what they did find. They did a study of about 339 children, 4 years old, and they found that, of course, they're going to learn the letters in their own name first. That was the highest rate of letters that children were producing. And that makes a lot of sense to us. If you know children who come in, they're fascinated with their name, they want to write their name, they know the letters in their name, so that generally are the first letters that children learn. And then we thought it was sort of interesting that based on the letter order of the alphabet, so A, B, C, D, children have a slightly higher recall of the first half of the alphabet than the second. Not sure why. I'm not sure if they weren't really sure, but that's what they found in their research, which I thought was interesting too. And then the letter name pronunciation. So letters that contain the phoneme were also more frequently recognized. So they found that although there's no specific order, that's what they found in their research, that those are the ways that the children progressed in their learning. Great stuff going on in the comments here too. What we mean by when the letters contain their phoneme is like the letter O doesn't really have the sound of like O, ah. It doesn't have that same phoneme, but when it does like a T and a T, it contains the phoneme, so children have an easier time recognizing that letter. So what does that mean? So it means not every letter requires instruction. You don't need to spend a whole day teaching on a certain letter, especially because not every child needs the same thing. Whole class instruction based on this text is inefficient since some children already know all of their letters and some children don't have that same context. They don't even know a letter from a number. So we often say when you're thinking about what you're doing in a whole group, you should think really carefully about, do all the children need this skill? Will this benefit all of the children in general? Or are some kids beyond this and some kids not ready for this? And then it also showed us that there's not one sequence for teaching the letters and sounds that's optimal for all children. Then how? We thought it was interesting. Google yields millions of results, millions a day about programs and how to teach the alphabet from parents, teachers, families. They want to know what books, videos, programs, curriculums. You can find anything. You can find millions of resources on how to teach the alphabet, but there's very, very little research to support the effective instruction on how to actually do it. So there are programs that you can buy that claim, but there's no effective research that talks about the most effective way to do it. So what the book suggested was that there's a few strategies that have been proven to be the most successful in order to support young learners in learning the alphabet.
So we had a group of children last year, and when thinking about how we could build their capacity and knowledge, we thought of some letters that were quite frequently in all of their names. And we did some alphabet action songs, and it was getting to the point where it was like 4 or 5 months, and this group of children were just not retaining the letters that we were practicing constantly. And after reading that research about how there's no perfect sequence, and then reading this, that exposure and practice needed to be repeated, varied, and not too much, it made us really think about our approach and not teaching letters once but many times. So the way we adapted that was instead of focusing on those 4 letters, we then grew to expose them to many more letters so that it was frequently being seen and heard in our practice. In small group instruction, we know this is to be effective in kindergarten, and it's also reassuring to see it said once again in research that small group instruction was more effective than individualized or whole group instruction in developing young children's knowledge of the alphabet.
And I thought that was really interesting too, because I would have thought that that individualized instruction would have been an effective way, but it actually, as in order of your bang for your buck, I guess to say, they think that small group instruction, grouping those children based on what they need, was the most effective way to teach the alphabet.
So teaching the alphabet sounds not in isolation, and connecting it to their learning and phonological awareness through their reading and writing.
And I think multi-component instruction is so important because every time we do our guided reading groups or we're writing, we are engaging with teaching of those letters and sounds. And when it's built in that natural context, like through a phonological game or when you're actually reading a story together, there's a genuine connection. And when things are taught in context with those multi-components, so in lots of different ways throughout their day, then they have found that that's when children retain the most. So children learn best when the alphabet learning happens in genuinely engaging context, and I love this image because I think it's so true. There needs to be a balance between explicit teaching and play. A lot of people have, when full-day kindergarten sort of came to fruition, a lot of people jumped on and said we're going pure play-based. We're not going to do any of that like explicit teaching. That's not right. We want to, everything is going to be learned through play. And I think that there's this pendulum, and it almost swung too much one way in the sense that those short little snippets of time where we do explicit teaching, then the children use that explicit teaching in the context of their play. Sometimes when you try to explicitly teach a letter or something that's happening in play, then you stifle the play too. So you want to give them a little bit of that skill, and then you want to practice it and engage with it in play. So we found that there's that pendulum or that scale, and you want to be careful not to tip it too far either way, because if you're trying to do it all explicitly or all in play, then you're going to find a little bit of difficulty in terms of balance. And that's what we found. We went a little bit one way, and then we went a little bit the other way, and now we feel like we have a better balance where we have this small group instruction time where we engage with it explicitly, and we're seeing even better and more writing in the context of their play.
So to add to what Tracy's saying, when finding the balance with traditional ways and new ways, we want to put it back out to you guys. You can use your microphone, chat box, screen, and how do you engage with the alphabet, learning letters, sounds in the early years, K to grade 2.
And I saw Barb, or the sisters, shared a couple of examples up above too. So some people have already shared a few, but if you have other ways, we'd love to see how do you engage with the alphabet in the early years. Or if you're in the higher grade, how do you engage with those students who are on an IEP? And how do you support them with a skill that's maybe beyond or not connected to what other students are trying to engage with? Loose parts. Sue, can you tell us a little bit more about how you engage with that with loose parts? That's an interesting idea. Morning meetings, stories, reading. I like that we're seeing a lot of connection to reading. I read a research paper a few years ago that talked about how connecting the learning of the alphabet and learning of letters to an actual book that the children are engaged with reading, there was a huge success in that too. Lots of guided reading. It's great to be able to build it right into that book. Small group based on students' needs. Puppets are great too. Children just love puppets. I see some people on the whiteboard talking about action songs. We used to use the alphabet action songs, and we still use some of them. We got the resource at Scholar's Choice, and the kids really liked those too. Great. You guys could be running this webinar. You have so many fantastic ideas. Fantastic. Okay, we're going to move ahead to the next slide, but there's a lot of really great examples on there. Sue, if you have a link to any of the songs that you particularly love, or anybody else, if you have a link to some songs or things in YouTube, that would be a great thing to share in the chat. Or because you're trying to pay attention and engage, you could share it on Twitter, and we'd love to retweet it and see it ourselves afterwards too. All of these great ideas, if you have photos or examples of them, if you can tweet them out on Twitter with the hashtag Connecting Learners and the hashtag OTF Connects, we would love to see them and then share them again with more people. Fantastic.
So some ways that we're engaging with the ABCs, we play a game called Zoom. We just use these playing cards, and we write letters, sounds, or sight words on them. Each player will have a turn reading the card, and they keep it if they once they identify what it is. And then if you get Zoom, a card that says Zoom on it, then everyone has to give all the cards that they collected from their round to that player who then got the Zoom card. And then just simple sorting by letters or by their feature, upper and lowercase, interacting with many, not just one letter. And then also it's interesting when you do change the different fonts, how that can really be confusing. And so looking at different fonts can also be very helpful when they're then reading those letters and text later on.
Even on our word wall, we have an interactive word wall in our room that we have found. We did a little bit of research on ourselves to see, do we think it's effective, are the kids using it? And for the letters like A and for Y, we have different examples of different ways that they might look in text. Even that G, there's the weird looking G that kids sometimes see in a book and it really throws them off. So on our actual word wall, we have a few different versions of some of the more, some of the letters that look a little different too. Another game that we do, which we thought was kind of a simple game that we could share with you to bring back into your classroom right away, is we play a game called Let's Predict. And so at first we scaffold by doing that game, and we have the whiteboard, and we might say, the letter that I'm thinking of has 2 straight lines, and we might do part of the letter at a time, and then the children start to predict what it could be. Super simple, but then it also gets the kids thinking about the lines and curves. So this letter has a ball. What letter do you think it could be? They might say A, they might say B, they might say G. So we get them starting to think about that, and then using an alphabet chart during our small group instruction, some of the children will play that game independently too. Another game that we use is called Snap. It's similar to Zoom, but if your top card matches another person's top card, then you have to say Snap. So it's usually a 2-person game, but you can play it with 3 or 4. It's just a little harder to attend to depending on the age group. Thanks, Karina. You loving our game. So they turn their card over, and if they both have an A, they have to say Snap, and then they get to keep that card. You can make the card say whatever you want them to say. It could be letters, numbers, words, however you want to do that. You could do some of their sight words from their books, that sort of thing too, but simple and easy. We also saw, there's a book called I Love Letters, and we got it as a resource a few years ago, and they had this game in it called Password. And so right on your door to leave the classroom, you can make a little password key, and you can tell the kids before they leave, okay, you have to type in the password. The password is AAKP, and then they have to tap the letters to get out the door. So it can be used as a transition. It can be used as a tool in the classroom. I've seen teachers use it with numbers. You have to show me one way to make 10, and they type 5. And you could have them spell a word. So you can kind of make whatever you want and kind of tape it right beside the doorknob, and it's like a password to get in and out of the door. You could also just have that password on a piece of cardstock, and you could use it before they wash their hands for lunch, and they have to type in it. And you can really scaffold it based on all the different needs of the children. So you could have children choose one letter if they're, just starting to learn that, or if they're more advanced, they could spell a word.
SWAT is a really fun game. Just on a little poster or piece of paper, you can write letters. You might even say the sound of the letter when you're calling it out. And they can either use their hand or a fly swatter to swat what they're hearing. This one I'll just bless you with my sweet voice so you can actually hear the song. So this one's called Tasket a Tasket. We put larger letters in their hands, whatever is available to you. That way the kids can actually get a good grip and feel all the lines and curves of the letter. But the song goes, a tisket, a tasket, there's letters in my basket. I'll drop one behind your back to see if you can name it. And it's just a great way because as they're feeling it, we'll prompt them, oh, what do you feel? So that we're hearing, oh, I feel 2 long lines and 1 short line. And then thinking about, what letters have that? And then some of the kids might make some references. And then after the kid guesses, they show the letter, and then we make the connection.
So, do you have any other simple play-based games that support alphabet instruction? You can share, again, right on that whiteboard or in the box here. I know a few of you shared a little bit above too and throughout. You guys are doing a great job. We're trying to keep up with the chat as we're speaking. But if you have any other simple games like Zoom or Tasket a Tasket, you can share here, or you can even share a little snippet on social media afterwards too. We are always looking to add more quick little games and activities to our bank for small group instruction and for play. I Spy is a great game. You can adapt it in so many different ways. Yeah, a lot of people use Handwriting Without Tears. We've been using a similar program for a few of our children who are really struggling with fine motor this year, but only 2 or 3 of them. Somebody shared the mystery letter. I would love to hear how that game goes. Maybe you could add what to do. I like that the person who shared, if your name starts with, you can use a lot of those little prompts for lining up, for transitions. You can build so many little literacy moments into those transitions too. I'm liking this Golden River game. I can't wait to see how to play that. Oh, Kelly, thanks for the link. Great. No problem, Kevin. Welcome. Oh, mystery letter. So putting the letter in a bag or a feely box. Somebody once shared a cool way to make a feely box was to just get like a tin and put a sock on top and cut a hole in the sock, and then the children could reach their hand in. Super simple, and I was just like, that's great, brilliant. Great, Jenny. Jenny shared some simple guessing games. Barb sharing Starfall, which is a fantastic site, especially for kids to use at home or if you have some computer time in the classroom. Okay, so it looks like Golden River is a smartboard game with some different CVC words. That's neat. That would be a cool one to look up if you have a smartboard in your classroom. I like the Chicka Chicka Boom one. That would be really fun if you read the book, where you have the letters on the popsicle sticks, and if they get the boom stick, kind of like Zoom. All the games are kind of the same, except a little bit different and a little bit more fun depending on how you play them. That one sounds really cool. I have Who Has. That's a great idea too, Tricia. Wow, fantastic. We're going to have to come back and go through this again to get some more of these ideas. Okay, I think we're going to keep going. I'm seeing some really cool ideas in here though. So we will come back, and don't forget you can come back to the recorded session to look at those ideas, or just at the end scroll through and copy some things that you want to try too. So moving along, we're kind of getting to the writing piece now. Ways to engage with the ABCs, again, like we heard from the research earlier, starting the year, and many of you probably do this, with an emphasis on names. So which letter is the most? In pairs, the students share the letters in their name. So if you have name cards, or if you write their names on a piece of paper or cardstock, and they talk about how many letters there are, you can have the students then talk about what letter do you think is the most popular and how can we find out. It's a really cool thing to try in the fall, and we did that in our classroom, and it was interesting to hear what letters they thought would come up the most in most people's names. It brought out a lot of graphing. They were doing sorting. They had a chance to talk to different peers. They noticed that some children's names were really long and some were really short. So starting to engage with it in that way, and children are so drawn to their name and their peers' names as well. So we're going to share a few different ways that our children have engaged with their names, especially early in the fall. And then we're going to invite you to share maybe some more, because I'm sure I've seen tons and tons on social media. And based on the amazing sharing that you've done so far, I'm sure that you have some more ideas too.
So again, even when thinking about provocations, don't overthink it. This is just a provocation that was set out with some capital blocks, name tags, and just asking the question, can you build your name? Again, using the larger scale blocks as well. Then you can see some of the curves being incorporated. Using different mediums such as Play-Doh. Snap cubes are, the past 2 years, our set of students have been really gravitated towards, in building their name. And this was a fun sort of small group We set out some whiteboards and scattered letters of different people's names on each board. And then when they came to their small group, they had to problem solve whose name belonged where. And we had some extra names in there just to make it a little bit more challenging for some. But it was a really cool way to learn each other's names, build each other's names, and become familiar with the alphabet and letters.
In the fall, we read these books during our outdoor playtime, Stick and Stone and 10 Birds. If you haven't seen these texts before, they're really great books. And they engage with the loose part play that you're going to see in the next slide here too. So afterwards, the children collected different materials outside, and then we brought out iPads, and we have like good cases for our iPads for the outdoors. So the children were able to build different letters using found materials, and then we had them capture them and put them into Pic Collage, and then we added them to a binder in our classroom of letters that they've created. So it's very simple, but I think activities like this are so important because they really get children to think about the lines and the curves that even before they might be ready to write them, they're able to engage with the structure of each letter.
So thinking of your own room, we're going to take some time to share what other materials have you used with your students to build words or their names in the classroom.
Yvonne's been sharing some really great things as we were chatting too. Sounds like you've been teaching for a long time, Yvonne. Some really great ideas. Paint sticks and wiki sticks. Wiki sticks are fantastic. Even using wiki sticks and a book that they've been reading to have them circle the letters with the wiki sticks. Those are great. Salt trays, screws and bolts, fantastic. I love the wires too. Different sensory ways with salt and shaving cream. Always great to engage with the senses, especially for children who really learn effectively that way. Paint bags. Fantastic.
Stamps. Those are great ways to support some of those children that maybe are even reluctant to pick up a pencil.
Yeah, Amy, I've seen stuff online too where they actually show the different pictures on ways that you could create with Duplo or Lego to make letters, which is kind of neat. Bingo dabbers. Great. We're going to move along. That's a lot about the alphabet, but I know that that's such a foundational piece on the beginning stages of writing, so we didn't want to not include that, but we want to move on a little bit to how writing looks in our classroom and how to genuinely engage with writing. This text is fantastic. Miriam's also on social media. She's on Twitter. I know that Mally's going to share the link there. It's a fairly inexpensive book. It's huge, and it's full of practical ideas and high-yield strategies that support literacy learning from K to 2. I would say it could even be extended beyond and before, but it's a fantastic. If you're looking to purchase a book, I would highly recommend this one. We read this one last year, and it really supported our instruction. The one thing that we loved about this text is that she started with this quote: "The bottom line is that new or different is not necessarily better. We improve our teaching by building on best practice, on what is working, rather than looking to implement yet another innovation." And I felt like a huge sigh of relief when we read that part, because I think that we often, when the new kindergarten program was rolled out, and as they're moving with a lot of inquiry stance in the primary grades, people are starting to feel like they have to let go of every practice that they've ever had. But if you've done something that's really effective and you know that something works, it's not always about just letting that go because it's an old practice. It's thinking, is this an effective practice still? Is this something that I can use still in the classroom? Or how do I have to revamp it to really meet my pedagogy now?
This is another great quote. "Learning to write assists children in their reading. In learning to read, children also gain insights that help them as writers." This is a traveling Pete that we are using in our classroom. We have a little mini suitcase, and Pete goes inside his book, and then there's a journal, and the children can have it for 1 or 2 nights because we know sometimes there's swimming lessons that come up. And with their family, it's a great way to incorporate that writing experience and literacy at home, and they can document what it is that they did with Pete that night when he came to visit, and then when they come into the classroom, they're able to share it with all of us.
So a little bit about our journey. when we started, we used to try to do a whole class writers workshop, but we found that it was extremely difficult to manage effectively. We could manage it, but we couldn't really manage it effectively and support instruction in the way that we wanted to do that. So then we moved along in our second or third year together, and we started to do some small group writers workshops. But we really found that that was hard to always fit in. We were doing these guided reading groups, we were doing some other literacy groups, we were doing small math groups, and it was really tricky to fit every small group for writers workshop into. So then, we moved to doing journals with the children. And so a couple years ago, we had a journal, and we would add a photo either once or twice a week, and then we would invite the children to write. And we found that it was more effective for the children because they were really engaged with that photograph, because it was often of them, or it was something that they chose, instead of just saying, here's a blank page in Writer's Workshop, come and write. So it was a little bit less intimidating, we found. So we started to kind of build from this whole group to small group. Then we tried this journal. And then we sort of said, you know what, that was hard to keep up with sometimes. It's busy. It's really busy in a classroom some days to keep up with everything. So now we've sort of morphed into this new way of approaching writing. We truly believe, we have seen firsthand that writing greatly impacts the development of their reading, and we've seen that reading impacts their writing. So we found that actually our children have developed more in terms of their reading through the writing instruction. So what we've done is we do small group instruction, and we have a blog that we will tweet out and share on Facebook later on about small group instruction. We're also doing a webinar coming up, so we won't go too deep into that, but we do small group instruction all at once, and sometimes we will focus on writing at that time. Sometimes we'll focus on something else. We do writing in the context of their play. During their guided reading, sometimes we will incorporate writing as well, but we don't have just that one time where everybody sits down anymore. So we wanted to provide that context just so you sort of understand what writing looks like in the context of our day. And then there's a fantastic video. If you aren't familiar with Lillian Katz, check her out on YouTube. Lots and lots. It was a little bit too long to put on for today, but she says that the engagement of their engagement of their intellects provokes them to ask for help with their academic skills. And I couldn't agree with this quote more. The children in our classroom, when they're engaged and excited about something that's happening, whether it be an inquiry, whether it be something happening in their play, they will ask you, how do I write that? How do I spell that? How do I record this? And if you can engage children in genuinely writing by modeling, by writing alongside them, by supporting them in the context of their play, it is a significant change in their engagement. So we found that when it happens in their play, like we said, with a little bit of balanced explicit instruction, because they do need that piece too, but when it happens in their play, they're going to spend longer and they're going to be more determined to follow through with it. So in Miriam's text, she talks about some effective strategies. And the first thing she said is be enthusiastic. When teachers show excitement, the children respond with energy. A couple of years ago outside, we picked up a recycling bag, and out popped a rat's nest or a mouse nest. We aren't quite sure what they were. And so the children were fascinated. There were these little mice running everywhere, and we brought clipboards out, and the children were writing. We took photographs, and we added the photos to our writing area, and the children spent so long writing about what they saw, what they experienced, what they noticed, and it was just capitalizing on that moment, and our excitement engaged with their excitement.
This is still an example that just warms our hearts. Our custodian that would also often come in at nutrition break, he was very kind and friendly and would often talk to the kids as he was doing some of his duties. And one day, without us even asking, this message came up on our board, and the kids were just so excited about the curiosity of what it meant, decoding, recognizing some of the words they already knew. And when they have genuine messages and they're connected to people that they know and they're close to, it establishes a purpose and an audience. So even just think of, who are some of the people that come into your own rooms or that they see frequently? Is it librarians? Is it volunteers? Thinking about how you can reach out into your own school community to embrace some of that genuine writing pen pal, essentially, into your own environment.
I liked, as Cheryl was sharing that, there was a couple of examples above where people talked about adding tape to Lego and then adding paint, like the chalk paint to blocks. Those are really fantastic ways to incorporate it right into that play too that I'd never even thought of. So those are fantastic. Thanks for sharing that too.
This was a cool experience that was done with Tracy and some of the kids. She was doing a summer camp with some of the students at our school, and they were exploring writing in the dark. And so they found a nice dark space, and they brought a blacklight paper, and then the way it was kind of brightened is just using highlighters. So they would write the message, and then it would glow with the blacklight, and then to engage, again, thinking of those genuine opportunities, they tweeted it to me, and then I was able to respond back to them.
A few years ago, we had a little guy who was just not interested at all. He didn't know how to write his name. He didn't care about writing his name. He didn't ever really pick up a pencil, but he had a huge fascination with trucks. So sometimes it's about slowing down and thinking about what are these children, what is this particular child interested in, what is going to engage them, what is going to excite them. And so we collected some books about trucks, and we just added them to our book area just to see if we could spark some interest. And he was fascinated. So slowly but surely we brought out some magnetic letters, and we said, did you know that the word truck starts with T? And I said, let's look for that letter in your book. And so together, the first letter that this little guy whose name started with J, the first letter he ever learned was T. He knew that T started with truck, and he started to look for it and search for it in books, and then he started to notice it in the environment. And so sometimes it's just about slowing down and thinking about what does this child need and what might excite them or spark them to get them interested in writing and interested in literacy.
Every year we find superheroes are definitely an interest in the classroom, and often something that we're hesitant to engage with, maybe we might feel uncomfortable with. And we thought about how we could use this as an opportunity to learn socially as writers. And then they were also bringing lots of comics in, and we were taking a look at the speech bubbles. So we used the app Comic Life. And what we did in a small group is we really talked about setting the scene and the choreography of their bodies, and how even when the superhero is punching, their fist is actually behind their head, but they're not hitting them. So we thought about, what was the message we wanted to do, and also is the text representing what our image is saying. So we talked a lot about that choreography, and then together it was very interesting because we were all at different stages in our writing, but it was a great opportunity for them to share their skills and write together as a group. Again, thinking about how you can even bring literacy into the gym. This was a write around the Olympics and lots of records being set. So we went to the library and got Guinness Book World Record text, and we researched some of the things that we maybe wanted to try in the gym, or saw images that inspired us of maybe things that we could practice in using our gross motor skills. So we did a lot of webbing together in the gym.
And it's great because then it engages with those students that maybe don't necessarily make their way to the writing table, thinking about just little moments in the day where you can genuinely build that writing in a context that's a little different than a journal or a writer's workshop. It's a little bit out of the ordinary, and I think sometimes that pulls in a different set of students too. We have a dance studio in our classroom. And so the children are free to dance and explore that area throughout the day. So they often will make up shows, and they'll perform different shows. So the one year when Frozen was probably the most popular movie in the world, the children decided that they wanted to make a play, a dance show about Frozen. And so they practiced, they created their show, and then our role came in to say, well, how are we going to let people know about this show? So then we said, you know, let's make a flyer. So come and see Frozen before it's too late. And they put the time, 10:15, and they created different flyers and signs, and they hung them around the classroom and a couple in the different kindergarten classrooms. They made invitations to invite people. They shared it on social media with their families, and we did a little tiny performance of a couple songs in the gym, but it just provided a real context. We have to make a sign or else people won't know when to come. And so sometimes our role is to navigate and think about, when can I really encourage the children to use writing in a real way? And so they have to use it to make a sign, but then how am I going to scaffold and support that writing too? So it's all those teachable moments. We also did some color mixing last year, and afterwards, we saw it in another classroom that we visited, and afterwards we had them record the name of their color, and they recorded the colors that they used in case somebody else wanted to make that color later on. So we wrote it on the jar, but the children wrote it on the paper, and then we collected them all in a binder and kept it at the paint table. So if we ran out of Kids Zone Green, then they could use the different colors above to recreate it.
At nutrition break, pizza day was always popular in our classroom, and every Thursday the kids would always talk about the toppings that they liked and didn't like on their pizza, and toppings that their families would order. So we set up a little pizza shop, just moved one of our ovens from our dramatic play area, and the children loved recording and taking orders from each other and then delivering them.
And sometimes it's just about like adding out the name cards. You know, add out your name cards to that area and say, oh, well, if you're taking Bob's order, you need to write down Bob, and then you need to write down his order underneath. And sometimes just a little bit of interaction or guidance from us can add a little bit more to their writing too.
And I think, as Tracy was mentioning, just a little bit of guidance, it can also just slow that process down. Sometimes the children get so excited and quickly engaged that often the spark dies, and then it doesn't get deep enough into their play. So again, getting in there with them and role-playing alongside them can also support that play being sustained a bit longer.
So another example, we had a little girl whose mom was in the hospital for a quick surgery and didn't know, yeah, our classroom is really big, didn't know that mom was going to be in the hospital. It was sort of sudden, and she had to have this few-day surgery. And so she came in, she was really overwhelmed and upset. And a way to kind of seek comfort is we talked a little bit about what was happening, and she said, you know, when we went, we brought my mommy some magazines. And so hearing her say that and watching her over that day, we had a conversation about, well, what could we do for mom? What could we do so that when you go to visit mom tonight, you could bring something? So over the course of 2 days, she invited different peers, and we got a collection of magazines from the library. It was a genuine way to look at what's a magazine, what does it look like, what do we put in magazines, and then her and her peers created this beautiful magazine for her mom, and we put it all together, and she took it into her mom. They had word searches, they had pictures, they had comics, they had some different writing and stories that they wanted to tell her, but it was a really beautiful and genuine way to look at a different text form and also to engage with the social development of things that are happening in the classroom too. Again,
Using some loose parts as they're building, sometimes just as simple as adding some paper and pencil too alongside that provocation and just modeling or labeling work. Often our children will grab it even just to save their work. It's a great way to just incorporate it in the slightest way.
And sometimes it's those short little pieces of writing. I saw someone mention above that their kids get discouraged when you ask them to write too much. Sometimes when you sit there and watch children writing, you realize, oh my goodness, it takes them a long time, because now they have to process the idea, they have to get it in their head, they have to stretch out the words, they have to write it down. Their fine motor's not strong, so they're really concentrating on making letters. Sometimes you try it on technology, which maybe will support certain children, but then sometimes you want them to write it too. So sometimes I think just letting go and saying, you know what, let's not ask them to write a story, because writing a story might take 6 hours with a kindergarten student. Let's ask them to just write a sentence. So, you know, this little child just wrote "a day in the sun," and we helped them stretch those words out, and it still took a significant amount of time, but not as much as had they had to write this big, long sentence or letter. So in kindergarten, sometimes I think we push a little bit too hard to try and get more writing, but focusing on that quality and short moments of more writing, it's helpful for us too.
Many schools are starting to get rid of old projectors. We found it as a really cool way to also incorporate a different way of writing. This is a message that one of our children sent to their brother. How are you doing at school? And we were able to send it through Twitter to him, and it was a great way because we got a pretty quick response, and we did a lot of writing back and forth that day. And again, that genuine messaging. This is on the iPad, just some labeling. We used Pic Collage. It's a great app if you're not familiar with it. But again, thinking about meaningful ways and to incorporate technology into their writing.
And often when you're trying to capture things with technology, children are often coming, can you take a picture of this? Can you take a picture of this? Can we save this? Can we take a picture of this? So when you're wanting to engage with those pieces and take a picture or save something, thinking about ways that you can incorporate writing into that. So when we took a photo of it, we say to the children, well, what are we going to do with that photo? Why are we taking this photo? Do you want to recreate it? So if they want to recreate a structure that they've built, then maybe you take a photo on the iPad, throw it into Pic Collage, and have them label it. Maybe it's Eiffel Tower or the castle, and then have their name on it. Now you've engaged them with writing, and you've had a genuine purpose. So I've seen a couple of educators, and we've tried it too, where we had a challenge binder, and if the children photographed something that they've built, we encouraged them to label it, add their name, and then we printed the photos and added them to a binder so that they could flip through and recreate different structures and things that they've made or their peers have made in the past. So always think about what can we do to add that writing in to those moments, because we often take 400 photos on our iPads or our phones or whatever we're using, and then we aren't sure quite what to do with that after.
Thinking of the outdoors and different surfaces, this is another example of a vertical surface. Any old chalkboards that you might have outside. Sometimes it's interesting, sometimes when it's just outdoors, it invites different children that maybe be reluctant to when inside.
Sometimes it's just about even adding a tarp. So in the warmer days, we'll add a tarp out, especially if the grass is a little wet or soft, and then we'll put a bucket with clipboards, pencils, and just being in a different environment may inspire writing or drawing. Every time the children pick up a pencil, it's a great thing because they're building that skill. They might be experimenting, they might be writing, but they're building that skill set. We had a little guy who used stamps to tell his story. After he heard the 3 little bears, he made up a story called The 3 Pokemon, and he brought in his little Pokemon from home, and he used the stamps, and we helped him. But this was a way for him to engage in learning letters. So we helped him to find the letters first. Do you need a P? Do you know what a P looks like? And then together we stamped out the different letters because his fine motor was not strong, and it was something that it took a lot of effort for him to even write his name. So we used stamps as a medium for him to communicate. Pokemon cards, huge interest for lots of children in different classrooms, so thinking about ways you can incorporate and engage with those interests. They don't always turn into a project or a big inquiry, but it's okay to invite toys and materials that are going to engage and encourage writing in the classroom in a genuine way. They want to recreate it. That's okay. They're copying text. They're learning about letters in that way too.
So again, another example of a vertical surface. And as we mentioned before, speech bubbles were a big interest as we were looking at comics and the pigeon books. So this was just able to us to provide it as in a larger scale as well. This
year we added a board called What's New, And when the children have done something exciting at home on the weekend, or even if it's at school, they learn to write their name, they can choose to share the news with the class. And so some of them, you can see in the middle, this little guy went to Great Wolf Lodge, and then we wrote a sentence about it. The picture on the far right, the little guy was in a wedding, and he wrote, "I am at the wedding." And another little guy didn't have a picture, but he wanted to share that next week he got to play in a real hockey game. So it's a great, simple, quick way for them to share one sentence of news. It gets them sharing that with their peers. It creates opportunities for conversation over the lunch hour and at learning centers. And then when we put it up in the classroom, we've seen the children referencing it over and over and talking about and retelling their news with each other as well. So it was, again, another genuine way for us to engage. We put it out on our Seesaw and asked parents, if anything exciting happens at home and your son or daughter wants to share that, send us, we gave them our email, send us the picture, and we'll support them in doing their writing piece too.
So again, we want to reach out to you. What are some websites, books, blogs that you use to support your learning in literacy instruction?
Thanks, Karina. A Place for Wonder, Christine, is really great too. Thanks, Kristen, for sharing that. We try and share as many practical ideas via social media as we can too. We're always trying to make our learning visible and make our mistakes and our successes visible as well, because we're always learning and trying new things. ABC, yeah. I haven't read The Literate Kindergarten. That sounds like I've heard somebody else reference that book before too.
Twitter is always a great, I find, positive tool in terms of sharing and connecting with others to ask more questions about our learning.
A Balanced Lit Diet. That sounds like an interesting website. I'm going to check that out. Some really good websites. Is Cookie a website, Kim? That's a great idea, Rochelle. Sometimes putting that, like, writing in the classroom in a genuine way is so helpful. They make reference to it. But what I find is almost over-labeling is when the old school way of going to Scholar's Choice and buying a sign that says door, shelf, light, and then putting those signs up. Those aren't things that would naturally be labeled in the world. We wouldn't see a sign that says light or binder, but I think that when you genuinely have labels, or in the context of a photo album or in a book, that's a really great way for children to have a reference. Great. Yeah, anything Lucy Calkins is really strong too. I used a lot of Lucy Calkins when I taught grade 1. Debbie Diller, her Literacy Center books, they have a lot of really good practical ideas too. We also have, I'm not sure if other school boards use it too, but we have the Fontes and Pinnell literacy kits, and they have some really good resource guides in them as well that are really helpful. They're very dense and big, but they're really helpful. Young children produce lots of great books too. I saw The Squiggly Story. That's a really good book. Read alouds are such a good way to engage too for children to get excited about writing. Dear Mr. Blueberry is a good one for if you're thinking about letter writing to people. Yeah, Christina, that's the one that we use too. It's fantastic. We have that text too, Yvette. We got that at a workshop a few years ago.
Yes.
We found that one was really helpful, especially for people who were reluctant to sort of let go of the worksheet mentality. Fantastic.
That's right. You can continue sharing your thoughts on here, or again using the hashtag #ConnectingLearners to continue to send out some of those ideas and resources so that we can also reference them after tonight. So we just wanted to talk and sort of end the night. We hope that we shared lots of
practical examples. We tried to build as many ideas that you could take and use in the classroom or adapt and modify, because we know that when we do PD, that's what's helpful for us too, to see those actual ideas in action. But we wanted to just end with sort of the stages of writing that might, again, they're going to have a few more examples, but they might support your thinking in terms of what they look like. Feel free to chime in the chat as we go. You guys have been doing a fantastic job of chatting, and we're trying to keep up with that too, so that's really great. But they talk about, in Miriam's text, she talks about emergent writers, and she says that they begin to write as soon as they can think and have the ability to scribble. And it's so true. You see these little ones, especially as they're just starting school or even when they're still at home, picking up little pads of paper and making scribbling marks and telling you what they're writing. And I think that's such a cool stage to watch. I sometimes get a little stuck as to where to go next, because the next stage is sort of that random letters, but do you encourage them? Do they just naturally start to do that? That's sometimes sort of a weird transition, but the more children are exposed to print, the more I start to see, Cheryl and I start to see the letters coming out in their writing, especially once they start to learn their name. So emergent writers, knowing writing is speech written down. That's a key piece of teaching. They have to understand that print carries a message. Pictures, scribbles, sticks and lines, letter-like formations, and they may use individual letters. So this example here, this little guy was in JK. He was super excited and interested in writing, but he didn't really know how to phonetically spell things out. So he made a book on Pic Collage, and instead of our focus not being on him sounding words out, we wrote the word on the whiteboard. He chose different pictures of cars, and then we wrote a label: white car, blue car, green car. And his skill that we were doing in this small group was he was trying to match the letters. So this was a way for us to engage with letters in a context of his writing. So I would write the word white on the whiteboard, and he would type the letters. So he had to find the W, find the H, and it was a way for him. I would say the letters out loud. Okay, where's the H? Oh, it has 2 lines down and 1 line across. And within a couple of months, this little guy was picking up all of his letters, and he was able to start then to stretch words out independently. But even before that, we wanted to support him because he was so excited to write things down. So this was one way that we found really effective, is he was just simply matching, and we were talking about those letters as he typed them. Abigail, we don't teach upper or lowercase first necessarily. The reason those ones are uppercase is because on the keyboard, they are in uppercase, so that's why we wrote them down. Lowercase is usually better, but the keyboard is uppercase, so that's why we wrote them that way.
Something that's always exciting is birthdays. So when it is a child's birthday in the classroom, we'll write happy birthday and the child's name on a whiteboard to invite them coming and making cards for that child, or a drawing, or also connecting with family members at home.
And this one you can see, it's that really inventive writing at the top, lots of lines and curves, and then you can see that the little girl wrote her name Emily at the bottom too. So emergent writers, still in that phase, this is like before school or in kindergarten, they can copy print. They usually can start to print their own name. They may use one letter to represent a word. So after they sort of randomly put letters, the next stage usually, not always, because writing is sometimes a mystery to us on how it develops, but they usually start to put one letter. So when they're writing bear, they might put a B. And then they start to create words with invented spelling. So they might write one letter and then a bunch of random letters.
So in this photograph, in the classroom, we were working a lot on retelling fairy tales. And some of the fairy tales that were in the book nook were being accessed by the children. And she had chose Little Red Riding Hood. And so you see some of her illustrations. And what she was just focusing on, again, is just copying the text and putting paper to pencil.
Another stage, same stage, sorry, they start to contribute their ideas to shared writing. So shared writing becomes an important piece. You might do that during your whole group time or in a small group. They can describe their own writing and drawing. Often at the beginning, they don't always even tell you what they've done, but then they start to begin to describe it. They begin to understand the concepts of an author, and then they see themselves as a writer.
During our baby project, we had children bring in their own baby photographs, and we would post it on the whiteboard, and we would put the name tags nearby, and throughout the day, the children could come, take a peek, and then write their guesses as to who the baby was. And then at the end of the day, we would share who it was.
Just another simple way to encourage kids to pick up a marker at some point during the day. You always worry that by the end of the day that some child hasn't done any writing at all in any context. So when you can find those little ways to build it in, it's really helpful too. So as they progress, sometimes you're going to see this in kindergarten, sometimes it's not till grade 1. I find that children develop at really different rates, and some children are just really ready to write, and some children aren't ready to write even by the end of kindergarten, and that developmentally might just be where they are. But they might start to use pictures with print. They're going to create words regardless of the spelling. They start to understand the directional pattern on a page, so they understand that you start at the left side and you move to the right side, and then they might begin to leave spaces between the words. We've been starting to work on that with some of our students who are ready right now and saying, you know, we want to put a space between so that when we're reading it back, it makes sense and other people can read it and understand it.
This was a writing piece that we made on Pic Collage. Often we'll use the photograph as the background and then add in their writing on top. Usually the kids are so excited they want to take it home right away, so we'll just take quick snapshots of their writing, add it on top of the picture. That way we can preserve it and put it in their portfolios so that they can reflect on it later on as well.
So in that early writing stage, they start to begin to spell a few words conventionally. Maybe you have a word wall. Maybe they know how to spell them from their reading. We have little songs like T-H-E spells the, T-H-E spells the, T-H-E spells the, T-H-E spells the. Whenever you can sort of put a song with something, the children seem to remember it a lot easier and better. And so we have a few little songs for some high frequency words that you can't really stretch out or sound out. And that supports a lot of our students in understanding how to use those words in the context of their writing. They might be able to start writing some sentences. They might be experimenting with uppercase and lowercase letters, and they begin to be able to use punctuation in topics. So after doing a construction project, this little guy, you can see he's really experimenting with exclamation marks. So he writes car, car, car. And then he recorded all of the problems that we had when we were trying to build a car using wood. And so the problems, 1, we tried glue. 2, we tried small nails. 3, we tried big nails. 4, we tried something. And then 5, we did the balls in the mouth. So I'm not sure exactly what he was writing at the end there, but he recorded all the problems that he had when he was writing or when he was building, and you can see that he's starting to use that punctuation and that procedural writing too. So to wrap that sort of piece up, unless we take some time to go back, this is the piece that we miss a lot. Unless we take some time to go back and show children how to read their own writing, they often don't connect with it or move on with it either. So they won't be able to improve and make that change if we don't take the time to go back to look at it. So feedback time provides an opportunity for modeling, revising, and teaching, and it's an opportunity to make notes for us as to what to go to next. But I think that that piece, sometimes saying to children, can you read this to me? And having them practice reading it, touching the words themselves so that they are actually understanding that they can read their own writing. And that's a piece that I will admit that sometimes I still miss when I'm doing writing with children, is really reinforcing, going back and rereading it so that they understand that what they've written can be read as well. So just to end the evening, because I know that Mally has a little bit of stuff to share at the very end. Are there any final questions, comments, concerns, things that you want to share or ask? And we will go back through the chat because it was so busy and so awesome, but we'll go back through that after and we'll look and see if there's anything else that we can share links for resources or ideas on as well. But if you want to take a minute to share any other questions either on the whiteboard in the chat, we will respond to them as well. Okay, looks like Karina says, how do you respond when you ask them to read it to you, but they reply when they don't know how to read it or what it says? That's definitely normal. We see that a lot too. So sometimes if they have a picture, you could make reference and say, well, tell me a little bit about what your picture was, or tell me a little bit about what you were thinking. Sometimes just rephrasing the question is helpful, but then making note of that too. If they're often saying that, then maybe can you engage with them a little earlier in the writing process so that you're able to support them in scaffolding that reading back after maybe? Because if they don't genuinely know, they might have exerted all of their energy trying to write something down. Maybe they genuinely don't remember what they were trying to write, but if you engage earlier in that process, you can then support them in rereading it again. So that's a great piece to notice, make note of in terms of your documentation and assessment, and then come back to too. Barb's asking, how much do your kids write per week? Do you insist if they don't want to? It's a great question, Barb. So we shared a little earlier that we don't necessarily do that writer's workshop structure anymore. So some children will write 4 or 5 times a day. Some children won't write at all during a day, and that sort of happens sometimes, but we are very conscious about when they are choosing to write. We document everything using Seesaw, and we also have a structured small group time every day where we will then invite children to be in a group where, even if it's being at a whiteboard, where they're going to be picking up a marker and doing some type of writing or drawing. So we don't necessarily insist, but we will invite them to different small group instruction if we're noticing that that's something that they don't engage with naturally.
So if you have any other questions, you can, again, use the hashtag #ConnectingLearners, and we will be sure to get back to you on that. That we will turn it over, as I know there is a little bit more information before the night ends.
Thanks, Tracy and Cheryl. That was fabulous. And being a former kindergarten teacher, and that was a great session, and I'm definitely going to recommend some of my friends to watch the recording because you had some great ideas. And what I love about the ingenuity about kindergarten teachers is you can take anything like nuts and bolts and turn it into a writing activity. So that was fabulous. So the other thing is I tried as best as I could to get as many of those websites and ideas and resources to add to the resource page. So if you think of anything else, if you want to send it to me, and I'll get it there tomorrow. So thanks everyone for joining. That was a fabulous session, and I know that Cheryl and Tracy would love to have some feedback, as well as OTF Connects would love to know what you thought about the session and also the method of professional development. So they'd love you to fill out a feedback survey. If you could do that, there's a couple of ways you can access it. One of them is to click on this live link. It's the only live link in the presentation, this live link on the slide, or I just put it in the chat box. And the other way you can get to it is to access it right when you log out of the session. It will take you to the feedback link, the survey. Once you've completed that, it'll allow you to access a certificate that you can use for your professional portfolio. Just a couple other reminders from OTF Connects that there are some more sessions that will be happening before the March break, and if you go to the calendar, you'll find some sessions listed for the end of March and also into April and May, and you could register for those. I think, Cheryl and Tracy, you mentioned that you have another session coming up, and what's that about? And do you know the date of your next session?
Sorry, Mally. I'm not sure offhand when our next one is. I believe it's a small group one. Okay.
So just if you would like
April 5th.
some more kindergarten sessions, there are some more listed on the site as well. And there's still some money available through the Ministry of Education for the AQ qualifications in math, technology, and kindergarten, and you can look for that on the website as well. And as always, to find out information about what's happening with OTF Connects, you can go to the social media page. So I'm just going to go back to the feedback link and stop the recording. So We've got 5 minutes left if Tracy and Cheryl want to hang around and answer any final questions. And thanks for everyone for joining.